Alon na party list, ito na ang hinihintay. Alon na party list. Alon na.
Pinapasigla mo ang umaga, o aking radyo. Kasama ka sa tuwina, o aking radyo. Kahit nasan man ako, laging tiwala sa iyo. Kahit anong pagsubok man sa atin dumating ay kakayanin. Basta laban lang, mga problema'y kalimutan natin. Halina't pakinggan, turn up the music till the sun goes down. Kung tabuas sa aga, paminawang makaritang ang mga musika. Pagkat ikaw lang aking paborito, at ikaw lang lagi na kasama ko. My favorite music radio, FMR. Maupay na adlaw ay inyong atinan. Come on, you feel the music, yeah. Got my favorite music radio, got my favorite music radio. Yo, Kabaraka, guess I got you, I will never ever let you down. Feel the sound, the sun goes down, I know now that Marisyo pa mation, kaupod ikaw umadlaw manuumuran. FMR lang gihapon, waray nga ibang pilion. Halina't pakinggan, turn up the music till the sun goes down. May kaupod ka, hindi nakita, kay Marisyo la, o pumati na. Pagkat ikaw lang aking paborito, at ikaw lang lagi na kasama ko. My favorite music radio, FMR. Pagkat ikaw lang aking paborito, at ikaw lang lagi na kasama ko. My favorite music radio, FMR. Favorite music radio.
Alamin natin ang mga programa at aktibidades ng mga kinatawan sa pamumuno ni Speaker Ferdinand Martin FMR Romualdez, Kamara, House of the People. Tuwing Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng umaga at replays tuwing Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Dito lang sa FMR Quezon 94.3, ang inyong favorite music radio.
This is your favorite music radio.
Resource persons and guests present today.
Secretary Amina Pangandaman. May we request our guest, if your name is acknowledged, to please recognize your name. From the Department of Budget and Management, Secretary Amina Pangandaman. Francesca Del Rosario. Yusek Janet Abuel. Margo Salcedo. Yusek Wilford Will Wong. Yusek Joselito Basilio. Yusek Gades Hope Libira. Yusek Leo Angelo. Yusek Maria Francesca Del Rosario. Assistant Secretary Yusek Margo Salcedo. Assistant Yusek Joselito Basilio. Yusek Leo Angelo Larso Alejandro Magsino. Assistant Secretary Aquiles Gerald Bravo. Assistant Secretary Romeo Matthew Balangwit. Assistant Secretary Clarito Alejandro Magsino. Assistant Secretary Rolando Toledo. Assistant Secretary Gerardo Maula. Assistant Secretary Mary Ann C. De La Vega. From the Department of Finance, Secretary Benjamin Jokn. Undersecretary Shelo Magno. Treasurer of the Philippines, Rosalia De Leon. Undersecretary Alu Dorotan Yoseco. Undersecretary Catherine Pong. Assistant Secretary Dakila Napaw. Assistant Secretary Yoprosinio Bernabe. Assistant Secretary Juby Danofrata. DIR Commissioner Romeo Lumagi Jr. DOC Commissioner Bienvenido Rubio. From the National Economic and Development Authority, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, Undersecretary Rosemary Edelion, Undersecretary Joseph Capuno, Undersecretary Melbourne Pana, Undersecretary Crystal Uy, Assistant Secretary Philippine Statistics Authority National Statistician Dennis Mapa, Undersecretary Sara Daway Ducanes, Undersecretary Reynaldo Cancio, Assistant Secretary Roderick Landa, Assistant Secretary Jonathan Uy, Assistant Secretary Greg Pineda, PPP Center Deputy Executive Director Jeffrey Manalo, Director Desiree Narvaez and Mr. Lorenzo Atanasio. From the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Governor Eli Remolona Jr., Senior Assistant Governor and General Counsel Elmore Capule, Senior Assistant Governor Iluminada Sica, Assistant Governor Lynn Javier, Chief Investment Analytics, Managing Director Leila Magda Rivera, Director Dennis Bautista, Director City Hanisha Botoca, Chief Financial Services Officer Richard Hadulan, Chief Investment Analytics Charito Malto, and Bank Officer Marides D. May we also acknowledge the presence of our members of the House. Speaker Ferdinand Martin G. Romualdez, Deputy Speaker Isidro Ungab, Majority Leader Jose Manix Dalipe, Senior Deputy Majority Leader Ferdinand Alexander Marcos, Majority Leader Wilter Palma, Senior Deputy Speaker Dong Gonzales, Deputy Majority Leader Antonio Tonipet Albano, Deputy Majority Leader Wilter Palma, Deputy Majority Leader Marilyn Remisias Agabas, Deputy Majority Leader Franz Fomaren, Deputy Majority Leader David J. Minority Leader Marcelino Libana, Senior Deputy Minority Leader Paul Ruiz Daza, Deputy Minority Leader Franz Castro, Deputy Majority Leader Erwin Tulfo, Deputy Majority Leader of Christopher Go. Vice Chairs of the Committee on Appropriations, Senior Vice Chair Stella Luz Kimbo, Vice Chair Jose Alvarez, Vice Chair Jose Joboy Aquino, members of the Vice Chairs of the Committee on Appropriations, Senior Vice Chair Stella Luz Kimbo, Vice Chair Jose Alvarez, Vice Chair Jose Joboy Aquino II, Vice Chair Joseph Jojo Lara, Vice Chair Ching Bernos, Vice Chair Angelica Natasha Co, Deputy Majority Leader Janet Garin, Vice Chair Vice Chair Joseph Jojo Lara, Vice Chair Jocelyn Lim Caychong, Vice Chair Francisco Jose Bingo Matugas II, Representative Maria Vice Chair Jani Salimbangon, Representative Yasser Alonto Balindong, and from the members of the House and the Committee on Appropriations, Representative Maria Vanessa Oventado, Representative Yasser Alonto Balindong, Representative Edgar Chato, Representative Solomon Chungalao, Representative Ernesto Junicio Jr., Representative Jaime Presnedi, Representative Mark Go, Representative Edsel Lagman, Representative Arnan Panaligan, Representative Agustina Dominic Dichetina Pancho, Representative Salvador Pleito, Representative Maria Alana Samantha Santos, Representative Christian Onabia, Representative Rosana Ria Vergara, Representative J.C. Abalos, and Representative Arlene Rosas, Deputy Majority Leader Christine Singson Mehan, Representative Roman Romulo, Representative Marco Angco, Representative Francisco Kiko Benitez, Representative Evgeny Vicente Emano, Representative Filemon Espares, Representative Isidro Lumayan, Representative Raul Daniel Manuel, Representative Rodante Marcoleta, Representative Journey Jet Nisay, Representative Janet T. Pimentel, Representative Joey Sarte Salceda, Representative Ron Salo, and Representative Eduardo Bro Eddie Villanueva. That's all, Madam Chair.
May we recognize Speaker Ferdinand Martin G. Romualdez for his opening remarks.
Thank you and good morning. esteemed deputy speakers, honorable majority leaders, respected minority leaders, distinguished colleagues, to our honored guest, Secretary Benjamin Diokno of the Department of Finance, Governor Eli Remoliona Jr. of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Secretary Amina F. Pangandaman of the Department of Budget and Management, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan of the National Economic and Development Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to this very significant event. I am deeply honored to be with you before you as we convene to address a pivotal cornerstone of our nation's progress, our national budget, considered as one of the most important pieces of legislation. Today marks the start of the deliberations on the proposed 2024 national budget, and we are honored to hear our guests explain the parameters used in coming up with the 5.768 trillion national budget. We will hear from these experts the macroeconomic and growth assumptions, government's fiscal and revenue collection performance, and expenditure priorities. The budget deliberations are a meticulous exercise that requires accuracy, objectivity, and most of all, transparency. As we hold the power of the purse, it is our duty to completely scrutinize the proposed 2024 national budget and deliver results that would sustain the gains of the past year and support the government's priorities and policy directions as identified under the 8-point socioeconomic program and the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028. We need to closely examine the budget proposals of every department and agency and analyze every program and activity and project to ensure that the resources are allocated and optimized on the right priorities that address the economic and social changes of our beloved country. With utmost diligence, we will ensure that every centavo of the proposed budget of the 5.768 trillion budget will be judiciously spent. Obligasyon po natin na tiyakin na bawat sentimong buwis na ibinayad ng ating mga kababayan ay magagamit ng tama at nararapat. Bawat sentimo nila may serbisyong kapalit mula sa gobyerno. Having received the budget proposal 20 days earlier than the constitutional deadline, I am confident that the House of Representatives will be able to deliberate and pass the national budget on time and transmit the same to the Senate. I can assure everyone that the House of Representatives will not take a break until and unless we have passed this very important piece of legislation. Sisiguruhin natin na may pasa natin ang 2024 General Appropriations Bill sa loob ng 5 linggo. 4 na linggo sa komite at 1 linggo sa plenaryo. Thus, I call upon the members of this august body to actively participate in the budget deliberation, listen and respect everyone's view, particularly the concerns of our colleagues from the minority, and reach a consensus that is beneficial to the country, especially to the poor and marginalized among our people. With an unyielding commitment to unity and accountability, let me assure you that the House of the People will diligently, swiftly, and resolutely take action on the proposed budget as outlined in the National Expenditure Program. We are completely mindful of the weight of this obligation, and we recognize the trust and faith reposed in us by our citizens. Together, let us be a champion of fiscal prudence, effective resource allocation, and transparent governance. Through our collective efforts, we will continue to uplift the lives of the Filipino people and pave the way for the Philippines with a brighter future. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Salamat, Speaker Martin. Muli, magandang umaga sa atin lahat. On behalf of the Committee on Appropriations Chair, the Honorable Elisa Aldico, it is an honor to welcome the members of the Development Budget and Coordination Committee to discuss the macroeconomic assumptions that will shape our legislative viewpoint on the proposed fiscal year 2024 national budget. As we embark on this journey, it is crucial to acknowledge the dynamic and ever-evolving nature of our economy, both on a domestic and global scale. The decisions we make, the policies we adopt, and the assumptions we hold will collectively influence the course of our nation's economic growth and development. In the coming fiscal year 2024, we are at a juncture where prudent macroeconomic assumptions are of paramount importance. We must consider the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the shifts in international trade dynamics, and the domestic challenges that continue to shape our economic landscape. As legislators, we must craft policies that foster economic resilience, inclusivity, and sustainability. In doing so, we must carefully scrutinize the assumptions that underpin our economic forecasts, ensuring they are grounded in reality and considerate of potential risks. One key macroeconomic assumption that demands our attention is the trajectory of GDP growth. We must assess the factors driving our economic expansion, from domestic consumption and investment to the performance of key sectors such as manufacturing, services, and agriculture. A realistic projection of GDP growth will guide our efforts in formulating policies that stimulate economic activity while maintaining fiscal discipline. We must strike a balance between short-term recovery and long-term growth, fostering an environment that encourages job creation and sustainable economic opportunities. The global landscape presents both opportunities and challenges that influence our economic assumptions. Trade dynamics, for instance, are transforming due to shifts in global supply chains and emerging technologies. As we set our revenue targets, we must consider the impact of these changes on our exports, imports, and overall balance of payments. Inflation and monetary policy are integral components of our macroeconomic assumptions. We must closely monitor the inflation rate and ensure that the central bank's monetary policies remain effective in maintaining price stability. In conclusion, our legislative perspective for the Philippines in 2024 is intricately linked to the macroeconomic assumptions we make. Our responsibility as lawmakers and policymakers is to foster an environment that supports economic growth, job creation, and sustainable development. By carefully evaluating GDP growth, trade dynamics, inflation, and monetary policy, we can craft a budget that not only responds to the current economic realities, but also position our nation and our people for a prosperous and resilient future. Our targets are not distant dreams, they are within our reach, waiting for us to seize them. Let us work together with unwavering determination and overcome any challenges that come our way. And at this point, Mr. Speaker, we accept your 5-week challenge. So thank you. And we shall now begin with the presentations of the DBCC, beginning with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So may we recognize Governor.
Ma'am, we have a short intro.
Yes, the DBCC Chair, Secretary Amina Pangandaman.
Yes.
For her opening remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Speaker Ferdinand Martin Romualdez, Majority Floor Leader Manuel Jose Delipe, to the House leadership and other members of the House of Representatives, of course, to our Vice Chair on Committee on Appropriations, Congressman Stella Kimbo. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On behalf of the Development Budget Coordination Committee, I wish to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present the fiscal year 2024 National Expenditure Program. With the indulgence of the Chair and this committee, the DBCC members wish to make the presentations in this order. First, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Eli Remolona Jr. will present the developments in the monetary, financial, and external sectors, as well as the outlook for the rest of the year and for the medium term. Second is National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, who will provide an overview of the Philippines' economic performance and the prospects for future growth and development for fiscal year 2023 to 2028. Next is the Department of Finance Secretary Benjamin Jokno, who will present updates of our fiscal and revenue collection performance, as well as on how the budget will be financed in 2023, 2024, and over the medium term. Finally, as the Secretary of Department of Budget and Management, I will present the macro overview of the fiscal year 2024 NEP and our priority expenditures. As an overview, the proposed national budget for next year amounts to 5.768 trillion pesos, higher by 9.5% than this year's national budget. It is the first budget to be fully prepared under the administration of President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. Anchored on a theme agenda for prosperity, securing a future-proof and sustainable economy, the fiscal year 2024 NEP is framed based on the 8-point socio-economic agenda in the near term and reflects the overarching goals and targets of the administration under the Philippine Development Plan 2023-2028. Thank you, Chairman, Speaker, and members of the House and the committee. At this point, I wish to request you to recognize BSP Governor Remolona Jr. to make his presentation.
Thank you, Secretary Mina. Governor Eli Remolona, you are recognized.
Thank you. Good morning. Magandang umaga po. To the Honorable House Speaker, Representative Ferdinand Martin Romualdez, to the Honorable Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, Stella Kimbo, to the other honorable representatives present in today's briefing, it is my distinct privilege to present on the macroeconomic assumptions that lie behind the proposed national government budget for the fiscal year 2024, along with our assessment of the monetary and external sectors. As the newly appointed governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, it is my first time in this chamber, and it is my honor to be part of the briefing of the DBCC. If I may present my slides, I'm going to talk about the Philippine economy and how resilient it has been in the face of supply shocks. The first slide, after the title slide, shows inflation rates. The next slide you'll see will show inflation rates. The blue line is the inflation rate for headline inflation. Headline inflation is the part of inflation that's driven more by supply-side factors, and Bangko Sentral has less control over this part of inflation. The orange line is inflation based on the core CPI, which excludes the volatile components of prices, namely food and energy. This one is the one that's more easily subject to monetary policy. As you can see, headline inflation has fallen over the last 5 months. It's now in July, it was 4.7%. However, core inflation has remained high at 6.7%, although it has started to decline, and that decline is largely due to tighter monetary policy. The good news is that expectations are still well anchored. If you look at the picture on the right, The green line shows how expectations about this year, inflation this year, have evolved. So that's still kind of volatile. But the good news is if you look at the blue line and the red line, it's about expectations about future inflation rates. The blue one is 2024, and the red one is 2025. They're very well anchored. In other words, the markets and the people that are part of the survey believe that we will hit our targets in terms of monetary policy. If you look at the next slide, we show you how we think inflation will evolve over the next year or so. So here you can see the blue graph. If you just focus on the darkest part of the blue graph, you will see that it will, by the end of this year, it will have fallen towards our target range of 2 to 4%. In fact, it will overshoot a little bit in the early part of 2024, and then it will settle within the target range for the Banco Central, which is between 2 to 4%. Now, the lighter parts of the graph, light blue and above the darker parts, those signify the upside risks that we still see. These upside risks are things like additional transport fare hikes, higher wage adjustments, food supply constraints, and then El Nino, which tends to bring drought not just to us, but also to our neighbors. So that's an upside risk. There is a downside risk, which is that the global economy is expected to slow down, and this will affect us. So I will talk about that a little bit later. How did we bring this about? We tightened very forcefully, and that's shown by the graph on the left. The blue line is our policy rate, but we have a corridor system in which we have a ceiling and a floor for that policy rate. So that's shown by the light blue line and the green line. As you can see, we've been tightening forcefully since May of 2022. And now we have tightened by 425 basis points. In the last two meetings, we have paused, we have not moved, we have reconsidered, we have reassessed. The data is still mixed, so we're not sure. We haven't been sure whether to raise or even to cut. But for now, we are at a pause and we're reassessing the situation. So that's where we stand. The good news is, even with aggressive tightening, it hasn't really slowed down our growth. This is shown on the chart on the right. The growth was extremely strong, of course, in 2022, where the growth rate hit 7.6%. It has slowed down early this year, but we think by the end of the year, we will hit something like 6%. This is part of the assumption for the proposed national budget. And we will do even better in 2025. So that's what we think will happen to our growth rates. Now, we recognize that when it comes to inflation, others have also played a part. There have been non-monetary measures that have helped bring down inflation. This include rice buffer stocks, provision of drought-tolerant seeds, and improved water and irrigation systems. This will be especially helpful if you get hit by El Nino. We have the enhanced Kadiwa program. We have importation of key commodities, for example. I won't go down the whole list, but these are examples of short-term non-monetary measures. We recognize we also have longer-term strategies. We will strengthen the local food systems. We have our HUG repopulation program, and we're about to implement improvement of digital and physical infrastructure. So those are the non-monetary measures that we think remain important. What about the exchange rate? We know that the exchange rate also affects inflation. The central bank has been using three tools. The first one is what all the tools we also use against inflation, but there are side effects on the exchange rate. Monetary policy, of course, is adjusting the key policy interest rate, what we call the overnight reverse repo rate. As I said, we raised that by 425 basis points. Tightening means a somewhat stronger peso. We have also occasionally intervened in the foreign exchange market. This is to avoid destabilizing swings in the exchange rates, which tend to upset the markets and make them worry about the peso in the future, and this tends to weaken the peso. So we have judiciously intervened when things get too crazy in the foreign exchange market. We also have been offering forward guidance. So these are hints about what we might do in the next few meetings. This reduces the uncertainty in the market, reduces the risk premium that they assign to the peso, and so it helps to stabilize the peso. Of course, if the peso is moving in the direction that fundamentals say it should move, then we let it move in that direction. The result of this is stability in the foreign exchange market. The chart on the left shows the exchange rate between the peso and the dollar. Since 2023, you can see it's been relatively stable. It has remained below 55 pesos to $1. And that's how we hope it will continue in the next few months. The chart on the right shows you that the year-to-date depreciation of the peso has been under 1%. Somewhere in the middle is the peso. It's a red bar, somewhere in the middle. This is a smaller depreciation than the depreciation that was seen by the currencies of most of our neighbors. So I think we've succeeded in stabilizing the peso so that it doesn't get too harmful to our markets. One thing that does affect the peso is the inflows into our balance of payments. The biggest inflows have been remittances, as you know, as well as business process outsourcing revenues. That's shown in the upper left-hand chart. Dark blue is remittances, and light blue is BPO revenues. That has been rising, and we expect it to rise further next year. Below that is net foreign direct investments. That's a smaller flow than the other flows. The BPO and remittances are about 6 times foreign direct investment, and the foreign direct investment has weakened a little bit. And we expect it to stay around the same amount next year. The effect of this is on our foreign reserves. That's shown on the right-hand chart. Our foreign reserves have hovered around $100 billion, and we expect it to remain at roughly the same level in the coming year. I think the foreign reserves that we have are ample and they're ample in the face of what we hope will not be so bad. We expect global spillovers. We expect, as I said, the world to slow down next year especially because of what the Fed has done. The Fed has tightened so aggressively. It's bound to slow down the U.S. economy, maybe even cause a mild recession in the United States, but it will also cause a slowdown around the world. And this poses risks to us because there are accidents, financial accidents that could happen, and it's good. It's a good thing that we have ample reserves to defend us against those negative global spillovers. In looking at our external accounts, the important thing, I think, beyond reserves is to look at our current account. So the current account is essentially the difference between our savings as a country and our investment as a country. In the graph, the orange line is savings and the blue line is investments. Up to recently, we have been saving more than we've been investing. But as you know, there's a shortage of investments. So we have started to ramp up our investments. Our savings have not caught up with that. But now savings are not as high as investments. So there's a difference that accounts for our current account deficit. It was 4.4% of GDP in 2022. That's not a bad thing, I think, because with productive investments, what will happen is we will narrow the gap between savings and investment, and eventually savings will exceed investment and we will have a current account surplus. So I think that's the direction that we anticipate for the current account. So for now, a deficit, but that deficit will narrow, and then we will eventually have a surplus, the way we are investing in our productive capacity. One thing that has helped is the resilience of our banking system. In this graph, the upper chart shows the capital of our banks. The green bars show the actual capital adequacy ratio. This is a measure of how strong our banks are. The light green bar is the regulatory standard for capital of banks, what we call the Basel capital adequacy floor. And over the years, since 2019 at least, our banks have maintained capital that far exceed regulatory standards. It's the same thing with liquidity. That's shown in the lower graph. Again, the dark part of the dark bars are actual liquidity. The light green bars are regulatory standards for liquidity. By the way, these are international regulatory standards, and you can see that our banks have remained liquid, and this way they have been supportive of our recovery from the pandemic. In the past, when we had a crisis, the banks had to repair their balance sheets. They were part of the problem rather than part of the solution. This time, they have been part of the solution rather than part of the problem. All these have led to our assumptions about the macroeconomics of the Philippines, and these are the assumptions behind the proposed national budget for fiscal year 2024. So here we assume that headline inflation will remain in our target range of between 2 to 4%. The price of Dubai crude will be within $70 to $80 per barrel. The exchange rate of the peso will be between 53 and 57 pesos to the dollar. The one-year T-bill rate, Leah's T-bill rate will be between 4% and 5.5%. SOFR, which is the secured overnight refinancing rate, that's a benchmark short rate globally, especially for dollars, we think that would be between 3.5% and 4.5%. We think exports will grow by 6% and imports will grow by 8%. So those are the assumptions for the proposed national budget. let me just mention some risks going forward. As I said, there is a risk of a global economic slowdown that will also drag us down a little bit. It's a good thing that we have ample reserves. El Nino will cause drought, maybe, in the Philippines, but it's already causing some drought in our neighbors. This means higher food prices. And then, of course, we have geopolitical and trade tensions. That's my presentation for this morning. Thank you very much.
Next to present is the National Economic Development Authority. Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, you are recognized.
Honorable Speaker Martin Romualdez, Honorable Appropriations Committee Vice Chair Stella Kimbo, other honorable members of the Committee on Appropriations, members of the House of Representatives, my fellow public servants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Please allow me to brief you on the country's recent socioeconomic performance and growth outlook. In this presentation, I will take stock of where the economy stands in terms of the targets we have set in the Philippine Development Plan for PDP 2023 to 2028, our country's medium-term development blueprint. I will discuss prospects in the near and medium term, and I will conclude by discussing the strategies and priorities for next year. Let me begin with a review of the Marcos administration's 8-point socioeconomic agenda. The first 3 points of the agenda focus on the near-term challenges confronted by our country. 1, protecting the purchasing power of families by ensuring food security, reducing transport and logistic costs, and reducing energy costs to families. 2, mitigating the scarring from COVID-19 by improving health, addressing learning losses, and strengthening social protection. 3, ensuring sound macroeconomic fundamentals and enhancing the efficiency of government processes. Over the medium term, the agenda is all about creating more jobs, quality jobs, and green or resilient jobs. This is the way by which you can attain inclusive and resilient economic growth. This is what we call social and economic transformation. I will now discuss where we are and what we have achieved so far in advancing and addressing these priorities. The 8-point socioeconomic agenda serves as the framework of the PDP 2023 to 2028. This slide shown on the screen shows the overall framework of the PDP. The red panel focuses on enhancing individuals' and families' capabilities to enjoy a prosperous life through human capital development, improving social services, food security, and social protection. The green section is the framework on transforming the production sector through modernization, inter-industry linkages, R&D, technology, innovation, trade, and investment. All of these are directed towards generating more quality jobs and competitive products. Lastly, the blue-green area focuses on creating an enabling environment and a favorable business climate and establishing upgraded infrastructure. Political stability, good governance, and disaster resilience will be ensured while pursuing inclusive and resilient economic growth. The plan contains strategies that are consistent with our objective of social and economic transformation within the medium term. That is ultimately aligned with Ambition Natin 2040, our country's long-term vision of a matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay for all Filipinos. Over the next 6 years, the development agenda of the Philippines is geared toward achieving the following headline targets. We will sustain high levels of economic growth in the medium term, with gross domestic product growth accelerating from 6.0 to 7.0% in 2023 to 6.5 to 8% from 2024 to 2028. Our latest available data shows that GDP grew by 0.3% in the first semester of 2023. We expect to achieve the upper middle income country status by 2025. Last year, our per capita GNI, or gross national income, increased to $3,950 US dollars from $3,550 US dollars in 2021. Meanwhile, the target unemployment rate is within 4 to 5%, and the percentage of wage and salary workers in private establishment to total employed, which is our measure of the quality of employment, shall be within 53 to 55% by 2028. The latest data show that the unemployment rate further improved to 4.5% in June 2023 from 6.0% in the same month last year. However, we need to catch up in terms of the percentage of wage and salary workers in the private establishments to total employment, as it declined from 48.5% in June 2022 to 47.6% in June 2023. Food and overall inflation will be kept within 2 to 4%. Food inflation slowed to 6.3% in July 2023, while headline inflation slowed to 4.7%. The national government deficit ratio, or deficit to GDP ratio, will be gradually brought down from 7.3% in 2022 to 3.0% in 2028. Outstanding national government debt stock to GDP ratio will also be gradually reduced from 60.9% in 2022 to between 48 to 53% by end of 2028. The deficit ratio was recorded at 4.8% in the first semester of 2023, while the debt ratio was recorded at 61% as of end June. The Philippines also aims to sustain its progress among the innovation achievers of the region by rising in the Global Innovation Index or GII rankings. Similarly, the country will be ranked among the top 33% in the Global Competitiveness Index by 2028. I note that the 2023 data for these two indicators are not yet available. Finally, all our efforts are intended to significantly improve the welfare of Filipinos. Our strategies are expected to result in the reduction of poverty from 18.1% in 2021 to a single-digit level by 2028. I now turn to an examination of our economic growth. The Philippine economy, as I mentioned earlier, grew by 0.3% in the first semester of 2023. On the expenditure side, household consumption grew by 6.0% in the first semester of 2023, a bit slower than the 9.3% in comparable semester in 2022, largely due to slower spending in food and non-alcoholic beverage, owing to high food inflation during the period. Investment growth slowed down to 5.4% in S1 2023, owing to a deceleration in fixed investments with muted growth in construction in Q2 or the second quarter of 2023. Meanwhile, government spending declined by 1.4% in S1, or first semester of 2023. It's way down GDP growth in the first half of the year. Net exports dropped by 2.3% in the first semester as growth in total imports outpaced total exports. On the production side of the economy, the services sector remains to be the main driver of growth, posting a 7.2% growth in the first semester of 2023. The industry sector posted a slower growth in that period, largely owing to the weak performance of the manufacturing sector. Agricultural output in S1 2023 has increased slightly by 1.2%, benefiting from favorable weather conditions. Historically, I note that domestic demand is the main driver of growth on the expenditure side, with household consumption contributing more than 60% to growth prior to the pandemic. This followed by investment with around 30% contribution. On the supply side of the economy, the services sector contributes around 2/3 of the economic growth in the country, followed by the industry sector. Meanwhile, agriculture has small contribution to our economic growth.
Sa mga programa at aktibidades ng mga kinatawan sa pamumuno ni Speaker Ferdinand Martin FMR Romualdez, Kamara, House of the People. Tuwing Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng umaga at replays tuwing Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Dito lang sa FMR Quezon 94.3, ang